Jesus Christ is, according to the Holy Quran, the last prophet of the Mosaic dispensation. He is mentioned by three different names: Isa, Ibn Maryam, and Al-Masih. Isa, or Jesus, is the proper name. He is called the Son of Mary to show that, like every human child, he was born of a woman. And one born of a woman could not be God, according to Job 25:4. And he is called the Messiah because he held the office of a prophet among the Israelites. Well, I'd define it differently. Kurash, or Cyrus, was the Messiah in Tanakh, but he wasn't an Israelite. And he really wasn't, well, I mean, the Israelites were present, but I don't think that's listed as a requirement, really, to have the anointed consciousness. But Masih also means one who travels in the land, and the title may have reference to his travels from one country to another. Jesus Christ is mentioned about 25 times in the Holy Quran. I started the Jesus and Christianity playlist with that. And the longest notice is on him, which speak of his birth and mission, are those in which he is mentioned along with John the Baptist. These occur in chapter 19, which receives the name of Mary, his mother, one of the early Mecca revelations, and in chapter 3, where he receives the name of the family of Amran, and is one of the early Medina revelations. Besides these two occasions where the life story of Jesus Christ is dealt with at some length along with the Christian doctrine, there is another early Mecca revelation, the 18th chapter, which deals with the history of Christianity, and the 5th chapter, a late Medina revelation, which deals with the Christian violation of the covenant. You know, they didn't refurbish the law for the most part, like Jesus in the Bible said to. Another important fact in connection with the mention of Jesus Christ is that though the same importance is not given to his life story as to that of Moses, yet much importance is attached to a refutation of the erroneous doctrines connected with his name. A refutation starting with one of the earliest revelations in chapter 12 and continued up to the latest in chapter 9. Yeah, it's not some Christian Kabbalah thing where you add, is it Yahushua or is it Yehuvasha? Adding a sheen in the middle of the tetragrammaton. Although Isu is, the Greek word for Jesus is a way of saying, "O thou." So they're basically pointing out that it's an egregor term. As regards to the life story of Jesus Christ, the earliest revelation is chapter 19, which opens with a prayer of Zacharias for his son, and the first section deals with the birth and mission of John. The second section deals with the birth and mission of Jesus Christ. Verse 16 states that Mary, who lived in the Holy Temple as a child, 3:37, had to leave the precincts of the temple for an eastern place, probably Nazareth. This, no doubt, took place on her attaining puberty, for the Jews considered a woman to be impure during her monthly courses. The Quran does not use the word state of filthiness or impure or something like that for post-childbirth, for menstruation, for having sex with your spouse. That's There, she received in the vision the news of the birth of a son. Verse 19 of chapter 19. She wonders, verse 20, because she has not as yet been married, and is told that the child to whom she would give birth would be made a guide for the people, a sign to men, and a mercy from us. Verse 21. We are told then that she conceived him. Verse 22. As women conceive, according to a saying of the holy prophet. After this, she had to go a distant place. Compare Luke 2:2-6. And her confinement came during the journey, verse 22 and 23. The third chapter, the family of Amram, gives some details on these points, not to be met with in chapter 19 in the first place. It speaks of the birth of Mary herself, who, according to a vow made by her mother, was to be devoted to the service of the temple at Jerusalem. Surah 3, ayat 35. Notwithstanding this, she prays, when she gives birth to the child, that both the girl and her offspring may be vouchsafed divine protection against the devil. Surah 3, ayat 36, showing that her mother expected her to marry and bear children as women do. Verse 37 tells us that as a child she remained in the charge of Zacharias and was brought up as a devout child. Here the subject is changed. Zacharias praying for and being granted a son, John the Baptist. The original subject is reverted to in verse 42, where Mary is spoken of as being chosen above other women of her time. Evidently, that this refers to the time when she was quite a grown-up girl. I don't like to use the word girl for anybody who can have a child. Same thing with boy. That's kind of disrespectful, don't you think? And then in verse 44, well, I mean, the Quran doesn't use this. This is the... I know it was a way of speaking back 100 years ago or whenever he wrote this. I don't remember what year it said at the time. And then in verse 44, we are told that there was a contention as to the man in whose charge Mary should be placed. This, in all probability, refers to arrangements for her marriage, for her charge as a child has already been spoken of clearly in verse 37. It is at this point that the earlier narrative in chapter 19 begins speaking of her leaving the precincts of the temple for an eastern place. The part common to both narratives is her receiving the news in a vision, the angel speaking to her according to Surah 3, ayat 45, that she would give birth to a son who would come in fulfillment of the messianic prophecy. The next verse tells us that he would attain to old age and be one of the righteous. In 3:47, she wonders because her marriage had not as yet taken place, and is reassured. The further details of conception and birth are not met with here. In both narratives, however, there is a gap to the time that Jesus is called and preaches to his people. In chapter 3, the news of the birth of a son, verse 47, is immediately followed in verses 49 through 52 by the call of Jesus and his preaching. In chapter 19, the account of his birth is similarly followed. Evidently, the coming of Mary with Jesus to her people, as spoken of in 1927, does not relate to the time of Jesus' birth, which is the subject matter of the previous verse, but to a latter time, because it is unthinkable that a woman should thus make a show of a newborn baby, and because Mary, at the time, was journeying to a distant place. Surah 19, ayat 22. Verse 27, speaking of Mary going along with Jesus to her people while she was riding an animal, probably contains a reference to the episode of Jesus riding on a donkey and a colt. Matthew 21, 1 through 7. Moreover, the reply given by Jesus Christ to the people on this occasion cannot possibly relate to the time when he was a mere baby, because in that reply he clearly speaks of having been made a prophet and having been commanded to say prayers and give alms while he lived. A baby a day old could not have been made a prophet, nor could he have been commanded to say prayers and give alms. Well, with all things, with God, all things are possible, right? Here are the words conclusively showing that 19:27 through 32 of Al-Quran relates to the time when Jesus had received the call and offended the elders of the Israelites by preaching. He said, I am indeed a servant of Allah. He has given me the book and made me a prophet, and he has made me blessed wherever I may be, and he has enjoined on me prayer and porate so long as I live, and to be kind to my mother, and he has not made me insolent, unblessed. As I have said, however, greater stress is laid upon the doctrines connected with the name of Jesus than the details of his life, and even circumstances relating to his life are meant to be a denial of his divinity. I mean, even from the biblical perspective, yeah. We are told that his mother conceived him quite a superfluous detail of life's story, unless it is meant to show that he could not be a God or the Son of God, for the idea of conception in the mother's womb is incompatible with divinity. The severity of pains during labor, which makes Mary cry out, as Sir 1923 says, "Oh, would that I had died before this," is not only to show that Mary gave birth to Jesus under the ordinary circumstances which women experience in giving birth to children, but also seems to contain a deeper reference to Genesis 3:16. "In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children," which according to the Bible was the punishment inflicted on women because of Eve's alleged sin. Well, the Quran doesn't refer to the tests that women have to go through is, punishing them for, what someone else did, or even what they did. It's not mentioned as a punishment. He is also mentioned as speaking when in the cradle and when of old age. 3:46 says when in the cradle and when of old age. To show the change of condition from childhood to old age, while change in the divine being is impossible. The prominent features of his preaching when called to the office of a prophet also show the same tendency. He is spoken of as a servant of Allah, 1930 and 43:59, by no means disdaining to be a servant of Allah. Surah 4:172, as a prophet, 1930. 3:49 says, a messenger to the children of Israel. Nothing more than a messenger before whom numerous messengers passed away. 5:75. One who had to learn the Torah, the real Torah, not necessarily what the Jews call the books of Moses. 3:48, repeatedly saying, as 3:51, 5:117, and 1936 and 43:64 say, Allah is my Lord, and your Lord, therefore serve him. Along with his mother, he's spoken of as eating food, Surah 5:75, showing that he had all the needs and weaknesses of a mortal. He is even made to deny his divinity in plain words. 5:116 says, and when Allah will say, O Jesus, son of Mary, didst thou say to men, take me and my mother for two gods besides Allah? He will say, glory be to thee. It was not for me to say what I had no right to say. And come on, if you're saying personages and other ways of referring to monolarity, you're using polytheism. Just be honest with that fact. A noteworthy feature of the narration of Jesus Christ in the Holy Quran is mention of his death, which occurs thrice in plain words and several times by implication. 3:55 says, when Allah said, O Jesus, I will cause thee to die and exalt thee in my presence and clear thee of those who disbelieve and make those who follow thee above those who disbelieve to the day of resurrection. Now, I've tested some Arab speakers with this, and when they figure out that you're saying this, some will twist the narrative. 5:117 says, I said to them not, save as thou didst command me. Serve Allah, my Lord and your Lord, and I was a witness of them, so as long as I was among them. But when thou didst cause me to die, thou wast the watcher over them, and thou art witness of all things. 5:17 says, they indeed disbelieve who say, surely Allah, he is the Messiah, the son of Mary. Say, who then could control anything as against Allah when he wished to destroy the Messiah, son of Mary, and his mother, and all those on earth? The first of these verses shows that Jesus Christ was comforted by divine revelation when his enemies planned to take away his life by violence, that he would be made to die a natural death But this promise does not stand alone. It is the first of four promises: death, after death, exaltation and divine presence, then clearance from false charges, and lastly, the triumph of the Christians over the Jews. The order in which these promises are mentioned is the order in which they actually took place. The second verse shows the doctrine of shows that the doctrine of the divinity of Jesus Christ did not grow up before his eyes, but was invented by his followers after his death. See the prophecy in Matthew 7:22 and 23. And the verse is conclusive as showing that Jesus Christ was made as if a God after his death. The third gives the reason for laying stress on his death and says, in effect, that if Jesus Christ had been God, as alleged by the Christians, he would not have tasted of death as did his mother and his compatriots. Of the verses which speak of Jesus Christ's death, by implication, I would content myself only with three. 5:75 says, the Messiah, son of Mary, was only a messenger. Messengers before him had indeed passed away, and his mother was a truthful woman. They both used to eat food. See how we make the messages clear to them. Then behold, how they are turned away. Surah 3, 844. And Muhammad is but a messenger. Messengers have already passed away before him. Isn't there more to that verse? Yeah. 16, 20, and 21. And those whom they call on besides the law have created not, while they are themselves created dead, are they not living, and they know not when they will be raised. The first verse in this case states that as all the messengers before Jesus Christ had died, so he too must have died, because like them he was mortal, and like them he ate food. The second states in clear words that all the prophets before Muhammad had passed away, and thus includes Jesus Christ among the dead. And the third says that all those who had been taken as gods before the Quran, and Jesus Christ was one of them, were dead, nor one of them alive. Well, it doesn't say everybody, but and yet, in spite of so many clear statements, the idea finds acceptance among some Muslims that Jesus Christ is still alive. This idea no doubt came originally from the Christian tradition, and then owing to the prophecy of the second advent of the Messiah. Actually, it's said that there haven't been any found in the first century from the narrations that are attributed to Muhammad that claim that Jesus is alive, or would indicate that, which meant nothing more nor less than the appearance of one in his spirit and power. Luke 1:17. It slowly gained ground. There is nothing, however, in the Holy Quran, nor even the sayings of the Holy Prophet, which lends any support to this idea. True it is that the Holy Quran speaks of the Rafa, or exaltation of Jesus Christ, but it is after his death, as plainly stated in 3:55. Nor does Rafa, exaltation by God, signify a translation of the body of a mortal to heaven. It only signifies exaltation in rank. One point, however, needs to be elucidated. The Holy Quran negatives the death of Jesus on the cross, but a negation of death by crucifixion does not amount to a negation of natural death. And what actually happened is stated thus in Surah 4, 157. And they killed him not, nor did they cause his death on the cross, but he was made to appear to them as such. And certainly those who differ therein are in doubt about it. Now, if Jesus was some white guy instead of this brown-skinned, black woolly-haired guy that was probably shorter than myself, he would have, it would have been harder to have someone else swept up and killed in his place. The story that he was lifted up to heaven while someone else was made to resemble him and suffered crucifixion is one of which no trace is met with in the Holy Book, nor in any sayings of the Holy Prophet. But the Quran says concerning the crucifixion of Jesus that he was nailed to the cross, but did not die on it. No, it doesn't say that if you survive crucifixion, you're still crucified, but you survived crucifixion. So it doesn't say that he was on the cross. It is exactly what appears to be the truth from a perusal of the Gospels. The Quran is not a book of history and is not concerned with the details of what happened to him after the crucifixion. But it tells us that both he and his mother were given a refuge, as Surah 23, ayat 50 says, a refuge on lofty ground, having meadows and springs, which description applies to Kashmir. And there is a saying of the Holy Prophet that Jesus lived to the age of 120. Thus, according to the Quran, Jesus Christ was born like a mortal, and he died like a mortal, and he lived the life of a righteous man, and was entrusted with a divine message, as Surah 3:49 says, to the Israelites. And the Bible says that he came to the Israelites, the lost sheep of the Israelites. But these people rejected him, planned against his life, and denounced him as being a bastard, calling his mother an adulteress. 456 addresses that. If the Quran had, therefore, to denounce the doctrine of his divinity, it had also to defend him against false accusations. It is for this reason that it speaks of his mother as a truthful woman, Surah 5:75, and speaks of Jesus Christ himself as a word from God, sort of a term for all exemplar prophets, and a spirit from him. He is called a word from God because he came in fulfillment of a word which he communicated to Mary. 471. Just as the Holy Prophet is reported to have said, I am the prayer of my father Abraham. Because of the prayer of Abraham, referred to in 229, Mary was told that the son she would bear would be a righteous man and a prophet, and it is in reference to this prophecy that he's called a word from God, or it may be in reference to the prophecies of the previous prophets that he may have been so called. Similarly, his being called a spirit from him may be in reference to the denial of the charge of illegitimacy against him, because illicit sexual relations are ascribed to the devil. It must, however, be borne in mind that Jesus is spoken of as only a word from God or a spirit from him, and not as the word or the spirit. Though he may have been called a word, especially with reference to the prophecy of his birth, yet every creature of God is his word, in one sense because it comes into existence by divine commandment, and hence it is that the Holy Quran speaks of the words of God as being too numerous to be exhausted by writing down. Surah 18:109 says, Say, if the sea were ink for the words of my Lord, the sea would surely be exhausted before the words of my Lord were exhausted, though we brought the like of it to add. Similarly, though he may have been called a spirit from God in reference to the charge against his mother, the Holy Quran speaks of the Spirit of God as being breathed into every human being. Surah 32, 8 and 9 says, And then he made his progeny of an extract of worthless water. Well, not mistranslation of ejected fluid. Then he made him complete and breathed into him of his spirit. The Spirit of God being breathed into every man seems to be directed against the Christian doctrine that every man is born in sin and a bondslave to the devil. Now, the Quran mentions Muhammad by name in 4 verses and by title Ahmed in another verse. And I don't know why they didn't mention that, because it relates to the whole Jesus story, but